hands that are like pocket jacks and below. It's less likely that he's got a hand like jacks or tens simply because I hold in a jack and a 10, but any pair nines and below I probably can get to fold here. I'm not going to be able to get him to fold a king here, but that's going to be the breaks. Even if he has a hand like a king or somehow turned a queen, maybe he peeled the flop with like queen jack just because he wants to get fancy and cute, I'm going to have at least 8 outs to what I think is going to be the best hand, right? There are 4 aces in the deck. There's going to be 4 nines in the deck. All of those hands are going to give me the nuts straight. So I'm going to be able to continue to fire on the river. Go ahead and bet 250. I think if I'm trying to get him to fold a hand like pocket nines, 250 here when the turn, demotes his hand to third pair is going to be enough. When I'm bluffing my opponents, I'm always thinking about the bet size that is going to be appropriate to get my opponent to fold the hand that I think that he can fold. Obviously, no matter what I bet here, he's never going to fold a king. Well, he might fold a king if I go, $18, but then I run into all the times where he's got a hand like pocket kings, pocket queens, or a 6, in which case I'm just dumping $18 for him, right? So I want to look for a bet size that is only going to accomplish what I'm hoping to accomplish, namely get him to fold 10s and below. So I think 250 does that. Sometimes I get a light peel, whatever. By the river here, when my opponent calls the turn, now I think he's got kings a lot. Very often he's going to have a hand like king-queen. He still might have a 6 of some sort. This guy didn't start with a full stack, so he might have a crazier range that I'm used to, so he definitely can have some 6s. He might have some full houses, trips. Sometimes he could have slow-played aces or ace-king here. But the fact of the matter is, now I got to the river with jack high. My opponent called 2 bets. Looks like he's pretty strong, so I'm just going to go ahead and give up and not really worry about it too much. On table 3, I opt not to continuation bet. This is a spot where this is what I like to think of as a coordinated board, or a board that I'm not going to be able to get my opponent to fold a lot of hands on. So this board is coordinated because there's 2 middle-ish type cards. 7s and 9s are middle-ish. Usually cards between queens and 8s are going to be what are standardly considered middle-ish. They're going to be boards where your opponents are often going to flop a pair and a straight draw, or a gut shot and a pair draw. Just something that if your opponents have position on you, they're going to float you on a lot of flops. That is, they're going to call and then kind of see what you do on the turn and possibly take it away. So I think I'm going to get messed with quite a bit. Additionally, when I raise in early to middle position and I get flatted by a full stacked player who so far over 12 hands has played 0-0, I think that most of his calling range against me is going to be either very, very strong hands that are slow playing pre-flop, such as 10s or above, or it's going to be a lot of pocket pairs. If he's even got a hand like 6s here, I don't know if I can get him to fold the flop. There's just going to be so many hand combinations that are going to go ahead and peel the flop that I don't really want to put in any money against here. So even though I do have ace-queen, which may be the best hand quite often, the likelihood that my opponent is going to continue when he's got air, and plus the likelihood that he actually has a kind of hand that's going to peel me, is going to actually convince me to go ahead and check fold the flop. I definitely don't check fold this flop out of position 100% of the time when I have air. What I'm going to do is I'm going to randomize my bluffs based on my equity. So on table 1, I said sometimes I'm going to continue to bluff here. Usually I'm going to continue to bluff when the turn has improved my hand. So for example, if I had 2 hearts, the turn would now improve my hand to a flush draw. So I could continue to fire the turn knowing that a lot of rivers are going to give me the best hand. So, when I have jack 10, the turn gives me the open and straight draw. I can continue to fire, knowing that sometimes I'm going to get him to fold the best hand, but then there's a lot of other times where the river can come an ace, a 9, sometimes even a jack or a 10, and improve my hand to the best hand. On table 3, a lot of the hands that I would continue to fire on the flop are going to be like jack 10, which is 2 overcards and a gut shot. Obviously, I can hit an 8 to hit a straight, so that's not a bad hand. Additionally, a lot of scare cards can come on the turn, which I can continue to barrel him on. If I had the ace of diamonds here, that would give me 2 overcards and the backdoor diamond draw. Backdoor means you need to hit the turn and the river to complete your diamonds. So, if I have the ace of diamonds, the turn and river can come both running diamonds, give me the best hand. The queen of diamonds here actually is in play. it is possible that the turn and river can come to improve my hand to the queen high flush, but that's not nearly as strong as having the ace high flush here. So I would just generally, I'd much prefer having the ace high flush if I was trying to hit the four flush. However, if I have the backdoor one card flush draw, I'm much more willing to fire this flop. So I would fire this flop if I had the ace of diamonds, queen of clubs. I think that's a totally fine hand to barrel. Or I'd barrel here if I had king, queen of hearts. Because then, if the turn comes a heart and the river comes a heart, it's going to be really, really hard to put me on the heart draw. So I'd rather fire when I have the three end cards all be hearts, and then I hit my flush, rather than having the four to the flush when I have the ace of diamonds. So I hope that made some sense, because it sounded a little convoluted in my own head. On table 2, the under the gun raises, a guy calls, and then I call with pocket fives. Usually, when it's a heads-up pot versus the under the gun player, I'm going to be folding pocket fives. I think while I'm going to flop a very, very strong hand when I hit my 5, I'm not always going to be able to get the stack in with my opponent. For example, let's say the under the gun player here has pocket queens. Well, if he's got pocket queens and I've got pocket fives, obviously if the board comes low and I hit my set, I'm going to be able to put the hurt on him. But 1 in 3 times, or actually it might be like half the time, the board is going to run out such that it's going to be pretty scary for queens to continue. For example, if Marine has queens here, he's not going to want to put in his entire stack against me when I check raise him on this flop and try to get it in, right? So that's going to be kind of rough for him. However, I think I have the best hand here. I'm going to play my hand pretty straightforwardly. I'm just going to go ahead and put in the raise, hope that my opponent has ace-king or ace-queen, and begin to stack him. So I was saying, in a heads-up pot, probably wouldn't call pocket fives out of position, but when there are 2 players, the likelihood that one of them is going to flop a pretty decent hand that can put in money against me is going to be pretty high. This is obviously a really, really good position. I am a little bit concerned that my opponent has pocket aces or pocket tens, but those are only 2 types of hands that beat me. This guy doesn't have that much money behind. He might just be spazzing out with ace-king or ace-queen here. He didn't have a full stack, so I just don't think that he's going to be that good of a player. So I can't worry about him only having aces and tens here. So he goes ahead and checks, trapping Marine, who just put in 125 and then folded. Obviously, I just get into the pocket fives, and as you can see, I have my opponent absolutely obliterated. He's drawing to 4 outs, the 2 remaining aces and the 2 remaining tens, giving him about a 1 in 5 chance in beating me. But so 80% of the time, I'm gonna win this pot. 80% of 34 is like, I don't even know. It's a lot of money. What is that, like $26? So I have the expected value of $26 there, so I'm really happy. However, I get sucked out on, which is unfortunate, but very, very much a part of poker. So, played the hand perfectly, still lost. That is definitely something that happens quite a bit in poker, and happens quite a bit in life. Sometimes you can do all the right things, you can say all the best answers at the job interview, and you're still going to lose for whatever reason. And that's just the beats, and I'm not ever going to let it affect me emotionally, because I still played the hand absolutely perfectly. On table 2, I have aces, which are the most beautiful cards ever. I actually prefer to have suited aces, but those don't really happen to befall me very often, so I'm just going to have to settle with a black and a green ace. Obviously, I'm playing with a 4-color deck, which just makes it easier to play when I'm playing fast, because, when I have a spade versus having a club and both are black, sometimes, I might misread the board, or it's just going to take me that extra millisecond to realize, oh, do I have a flush? However, if all the cards are green or blue or red, then it's just really easy for me to notice. So, just kind of my initial read is that this opponent is full stacked, which is good, because I have $25, and I want to get all of his $25. And over 6 hands, he's played 33-17, which means he's played 2 out of those 6 hands, and he's raised coming in 1 out of the 6 hands. Now, including this hand, he's played 3 out of 7 hands and raised twice out of 7. So far, over a very, very small sample, he's pretty aggressive. I'm going to go ahead and play my hand straightforwardly and re-raise him pre-flop. This is a position where I'm expected to be pretty loose and pretty crazy. Very often when an opponent raises and I'm on the button, because I have position, because I have the threat of playing with position for all future streets, I'm going to 3-bet my opponents with a wide range of bluffs and very strong hands, and just kind of put my opponent off kilter. I think it's important to re-raise your very strong hands here, as well as your bluffs, because if I'm only doing one or the other, my range becomes transparent and pretty easy to play against. For example, if I'm bluffing too often, then my opponents can either re-bluff me pre-flop or just try to call me down very often without having any problems. However, if I'm really extraordinarily tight and I only re-raise when I have really strong value hands, then my opponent's going to be able to play pretty easily against me. He can just kind of fold his hands. So I'm definitely going to be doing a lot of crazy stuff on the button. Usually, my overall 3-betting percentage in these games is like 3 to 4%. I'm not doing it that often. I usually like seeing a lot of flops and exercising my post-flop advantage over my inferior opponents. But this is a spot where I'm expected to bluff, so because I'm expected to bluff, I'm also going to play my value hands very fast. Something I'm always asking myself is, when I have a very strong hand, I'm going to play it like it's a bluff. When I have a bluff, I'm going to play it like a very strong hand, and my opponents are just going to get into a guessing game against me. On table 1, I raise the button, very, very standardly. I accidentally misclick and make it 88 cents instead of 75 cents, which is more force of habit. I was having too much of an erection on table 2 with my aces to really micromanage as well as I needed to on table 1, although my standard opening here is definitely 75 cents. And I go ahead and get 3-bet. As you've noticed, I've been getting 3-bet quite a bit. These are aggressive games, even for these small limits. I'm not going crazy. I'm not peeling these 3-bets particularly loosely. I'm playing very solid. Until I have really good information on my opponents, I'm not going to be making a lot of plays against him. So, on table 1, the opponent who re-raised me looks extraordinarily tight over 34 hands. Out of those 34, it looks like he's only played 6%, so that's maybe he's played 2 hands and raised once. That's really, really tight. So even though 8s might be the best hand here, obviously this guy can have a hand like ace-king or ace-queen. Against his overall range, when I compare my equity, that is, how likely I'm going to be good when, at showdown, it's probably not that favorable. So I'm going to go ahead and find a fold with 8s. If my opponent was significantly more aggressive, I totally wouldn't mind 4-betting, that is coming over the top and then just trying to get it all in. In very, very aggressive games, a hand like 8s is definitely going to be pretty standard to get in pre-flop button versus small blind. But this is a lower limit. My opponent looks to be very tight, very passive, so just going to give it to him here. On table 2, I flopped an overpair to the board, which is absolutely fantastic. The only hands I'm really worried about are pocket kings here. I can be worried about pocket deuces and pocket 8s, but usually facing a 3-bet out of position, people play extraordinarily tight and show up with a pretty narrow range of hands. On table 1, I'm folding a hand as strong as pocket 8s in position, so I think that it's going to be less likely that my opponents are going to call me out of position with a similar hand. That being said, people are bad, people are spewy, they do bad things, so sometimes I'm going to see pocket 2s and pocket 8s. In a 3-bet pot, in general, when I have a pretty good idea that my hand is the best, I'm just never going to fold. I just consider it what's called a cooler, that is an inevitable setup situation if my opponent shows me a better hand. So if my opponent shows me a hand like pocket kings, pocket 8s, or pocket deuces, absolutely good for him. He deserves to have all of my money. Well, he doesn't deserve it. It's not like he worked hard for it. He just happened to run into a spot where the pot was huge and I had a cooler. It was a cooler situation. I go ahead and bet 2/3 pot, which is pretty much my standard. This is a very dry board. And so this is a spot where I would just go ahead and bet with all of my bluffs as well. If I would do that with my bluffs, I have to do that with my value hands. If I had ace-king here, I'd probably bet here. I'd often bet if I had 10s, jacks, queens. Not because I think those hands are necessarily fantastic against my opponent's calling range. That is, if I have 10s here and I bet my opponent calls me, 10s might not be the best. But against very perceptive opponents, if I only check back this flop when I don't have, if I have a king or worse, like if I have pocket 9s or pocket 10s or pocket jacks, but then I always bet here with my really strong hands in air, that effectively polarizes my range. That is, when I bet the flop, I'm either really, really strong or really, really weak, and that makes me pretty easy to play against.